Hello everyone. Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Who doesn't like to listen to a good story? We all do, right? Stories are everywhere. We're either witnessing, living, or telling stories all the time. Today's discussion will be about the power of stories and how storytelling can change us and the world we live in. So let's start by introducing ourselves. We have on our panel today Camilla Kernis, and she's the co-founder of Global Young Voices. We have Amy Lieberman, who's a reporter for DevX. We have Bernadette Anat, who's the team community lead at Instagram. We have Fresh Johnson, who's the storyteller at Dear World. And we have Courtney Coop, the vice president of content at Great Big Story. Why don't we start by introducing ourselves? We can start with you, Amy. Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here, so thank you for coming and for joining us today. My name is Amy Lieberman. I'm a journalist originally from New York, and I guess actually since I was 16 really, I've worked as a journalist first from, I guess, on my school newspaper, then in college, and then very quickly professionally after I graduated. I've worked internationally from Latin America, from Southeast Asia, out of the UN, on immigration in the US, on climate change, mostly in a freelance capacity. For some publications, you might read Slate, The Atlantic, The Guardian, and now more recently I work full-time for DevX, and we cover international development and humanitarian affairs, and I report for them out of the UN.
Hey everybody, I am Fresh Johnson, a storyteller with Dear World, native New Orleanian down in Louisiana. And my work with Dear World actually stems back from my time in radio, which is where I initially fell in love with the idea and just the process of talking to people. Doing interviews from different people that would come into the radio station. There was a point when I decided that I wanted more substance, more of a legacy to leave behind, and just talking about more than celebrity gossip. A friend of mine who's the CEO, Robert Fogarty, had the idea to bring me on as a storyteller, and since then we've been covering the stories of people coast to coast. I primarily work on a college tour leg where we travel to colleges and universities and promote a lot of diversity and inclusion and just the power of sharing, getting people talking more, focusing more on the things we have in common versus the things that separate us. I find it to be a very rewarding process. I have had the chance to meet some of you brilliant folks at our session yesterday, so I'm definitely looking forward to doing more talking about the stories and the things that we've been walking around with. It's time to talk about it.
Hi everyone, my name is Berna. I work at Instagram. As Eddie said, I'm the teen community lead at Instagram, which basically means my entire job is to go around the US and sometimes parts of our global markets and talk to the incredible young creators that are doing anything interesting on Instagram. It's a very, very fun and cool job. It lets me speak to a lot of you folks who let me be here today. I might have met some of you at the Winter Assembly as well. Working at Instagram on the community team means that we reach out again to the most interesting young creators, young, old, everyone, on Instagram, just to see what is being created out there, what stories are being told, and how can Instagram help amplify those stories as well. My own journey as a storyteller started when I really wanted to be the editor-in-chief of a teen magazine, and I started working for Glamour. I worked for 17 out of here in New York, and then I transitioned over to working face-to-face with teens for the YMCA for youth development, and then came over to Instagram, obviously a pretty big platform to be able to amplify the stories of young people. So I'm happy to represent those stories and hear more of your stories as well.
All right, so good morning everyone. My name is Camilla Kernis and I'm the co-founder of Global Young Voices. I'm 24 and I'm Italian. Who's from Italy here? Anybody from Italy? All right, that's good. So my background is actually in management engineering. So I have a bachelor and master's degree in engineering. I have worked at the European Commission in the European semester process. I have been head of the Italian delegation to the G20 Youth Summit. And I'm also here, of course, as co-founder of Global Young Voices, and we're running a session this afternoon. Of course, you're all invited to attend. And I'm very excited about this discussion, and I hope that we can make it as interactive as possible, because I spoke to some of you in the past 3 days, and I know you have amazing, amazing stories to tell. So please try to ask questions or say your opinion whenever you feel. All right?
Hi, I'm Courtney. I work at Great Big Story, which hopefully you all are familiar with. We are a relatively new video storytelling brand. We've been around for about 2 years now. And our goal is to tell incredibly inspiring, amazing, surprising stories from all around the world. Personally, I got my start in journalism. I started in television news, in the newsrooms of NBC, of ABC. It was incredibly fulfilling, but I realized after probably about 7 years, I was beginning to feel really creatively stifled. I think it's because television news was really well established, and there was a definitive way in which you told a story and you reported on what was going on in the world. And I just wanted to take more risks, and I wanted to find my voice, and I wanted to find out who I was as a storyteller. And it was a little hard to do it in that environment. And so I took that opportunity to really kind of transition into what was at the time the burgeoning world of digital media and digital video. And digital video, still to this day, I don't think anyone has defined how you tell a story. There are so many different ways to tell a story, and there's so many creative chances that you're allowed to take. And so when I helped start Great Big Story, it was really something that I wanted to nurture, that feeling for our team that we can tell a story and help people find their voice and basically talk about what's important to them and find their narrative. And it's the whole reason our team, we don't refer to ourselves as producers, we don't refer to ourselves as directors, we call ourselves storytellers. So if you haven't checked out Great Big Story, Evan, that is you, right, that I'm looking at right now, right? Yes, so Evan, who's sitting amongst you, we basically told his story. He is the one of the many of all of you who have really incredibly wonderful things that you're doing and inspiring things that you're doing. And we really take great pride in being the place that hopefully you get to share those.
All right, thank you, dear panelists. Now we're gonna move to start discussing our first topic for today, which is the universal nature of stories and the current state of our society's narratives. I would like to ask you, are we on our way today toward an inclusive society? What do you think? Who would like to start? We all, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so it's an interesting question. It's a big question, obviously, and you could take it any number of different ways. Something I thought about a little bit. And I guess most interesting, maybe for you guys, just be hearing my personal perspective, just my experience on this. Because I think if you look at the world today, it's not exactly an equal society, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, and increasingly we're finding inequality is widening, right? On a global scale, and then within countries, even where they're becoming richer, people are both becoming poorer and richer simultaneously, and that gap is just getting bigger and bigger. But what I've seen a lot in my work at the UN and other places, that people are increasingly better able to access opportunities, right? You're all here, which I think is amazing. People know their rights increasingly. People are more incensed by what they're seeing in the world, in the political sphere today. You see Indigenous people coming to the UN saying we want us to be the General Assembly. People saying we want to be involved in these conversations, we want to be involved in these talks, we have the right to do so. And really fighting, I think, to have that access and pushing for that. And I think also the internet, just mobile phones, there's a saying here that I hear talked about a lot at the UN for some reason, that you have more phones than toilets in India, which obviously is not great in a lot of ways, but it does mean, just that reality of the prevalence of phones, that people are able to connect and tune into these sorts of forums in a way, consult on the SDGs, development goals, in a way that you never would have been able to, probably even when the the MDGs were established. So I think that in some ways that is pushing us in a more positive direction.
And to piggyback off of what Amy said, I feel as though accessibility plays a major part in showing a lot of the divisive things that are happening around us. And that being said, you have organizations like Dear World, you have organizations like Great Big Story that come up and provide platforms for people to continuously shed light on these things. And it also gives you a platform to tell your story, which shows other people, oh, hey, that happened to me too, or that's something that I've experienced as well. So while I don't necessarily think that we're on our way to an inclusive society, I think we're finding out what the problems are, because there's scopes being put on certain things. So it's kind of a human responsibility. So, okay, what can I do to help? What can I do to bridge this gap? What can I do to connect with somebody that I may not have connected with otherwise? So accessibility plays a major part in fixing a problem. Though I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, I feel as though advances that we're making with social media and such, we'll have the tools we need.
Right.
Can I jump in on, so just to piggyback off you? I think what you said that was really lovely, that I agree with, is I think it starts with each and every one of us. And it starts with a curiosity. If you think that you know everything and you've learned everything, then that's where we find ourselves, where you're broken off from people and you see the formation of just kind of like individual units. But if you as individuals, which I know you all do because that's why you're here, have a curiosity about the world around you, the people around you, what makes them different from you, what makes them the same as you, that's how we eventually get there.
I would only add on to that in the sort of like yes and no trending answer, in that social media has a huge responsibility in that question. I mean, sort of the reason that things like Instagram and Facebook were created were to bring our worlds closer together, but as a lot of us know in the past year, sometimes that means bringing only your world closer around you. We follow who we agree with, we follow who we know, and then it becomes a sort of echo chamber, and it's sort of the antithesis of inclusivity. And so I think it's a responsibility of the individual, absolutely, and I think it's also the responsibility of companies like Instagram and like so many others that do connect the world, to make sure that we're connecting the world and not just our individual worlds.
Okay, so just to build up on what has been said so far. So yes, I think that we've done many steps forward for what concerns accessibility, because everybody, of course, more people increasingly have phones, they have access to information, many platforms out there. But I think that also the other side of the coin is that there is a lot of people that can create content. So the media is not only just some companies, very big companies that send out their information, but it's also people, peers that share information with each other. And the angle that Global Young Voices has taken is the youth angle. So basically what we do is we share stories of youth with other youth so that they can connect and be inspired or even work together. So for example, when we were at FDU for the Social Venture for Sustainable Development, one of the winning team was actually doing a project on female genital mutilation. And then in our session this afternoon, there will be Kennedy who will also be tackling this problem. And this is what our platform wants to do, bring these two people together so they can work together. Their skills can be complementary. So storytelling, it's good because it raises information, but I think that it's even better when it calls to action, when it creates an impact, and it brings two people together to work together and really create a society for all.
Well, thank you for that. We have an optimistic panelist today with us. I actually want you to tell me about your stories. We're going to talk about the stories that our panelists have worked on. So we're just going to talk about that. And I want you to start telling me about the hidden or untold stories that you have worked on. So the special stories that have characterized your career.
I could jump right in. There are a ton of stories at Instagram that our community team has worked on that I get very ridiculously excited about when I think about them. Probably thinking like, what does the Instagram community team even do? Because there are developers and there are programmers and like, what are you humans about? What we do basically is take the stories of Instagram creators that are not necessarily always told. We want to serve the underrepresented voices and lift them up to press, lift them up to be featured on Instagram's account, and lift them up to do official events with Instagram so that we can make sure that their reach reaches outside of their worlds, like we're talking about. One story that I love to share is of a young woman named Taylor. She's in LA, she's 19 years old, and she got really, really sick of seeing the media's portrayal of the perfect body. Anyone feel that? Like, the bodies that you see out there are just not even the real bodies in the world. Yes, thank you. So Taylor got sick of that and thankfully decided to use Instagram to show what she wanted to see in the world and to allow others to have a voice of like, that's not my body out there, this is my body, and it deserves to be praised and it deserves to be seen. So she created something called, the Instagram handle is The Naked Diaries. The Naked Diaries with 1D. And it's not one that I would necessarily put up on the screen at the UN. It's a lot of bodies that people aren't comfortable with. You know, it's scars, it's curves, it's injuries, and it's disabilities. But these are all sort of user-generated, and people basically contact Taylor to say, I want my body to be on Naked Diaries. I want to show my sort of like journey with my own comfort in my body and body positivity. And some of these people who are sharing their stories are not like, yes, it's my body, I'm amazing. Some of them are like, I'm really insecure about this, and I just want to show the world that your body journey is not always like a shooting star upwards. Sometimes it's a roller coaster. And my favorite thing I think about Taylor telling those stories is that she's created this world on the Naked Diaries Instagram account where it's entirely positive comments. She's been able to use our comment filtering, thank goodness, to take out what you would probably imagine to be lots and lots of negative comments about people's bodies. Lots of people shaming each other, lots of people saying your body's not something to show off, it's something to hide. But all the comments there are incredibly positive. My favorite comments, of course, are always the ones that are like, I didn't know that someone else's body looked that way. I didn't know that someone else's skin looked that way. I now feel less alone in my own skin. And so not only is Taylor creating a world in which she gets to tell her story, but she's uplifting the stories of everyone else. And those stories aren't so hidden anymore. So follow the Naked Diaries.
I'll jump in. So at Great Big Story, we have a motto, which is tell me something I didn't know and show me something I've never seen. So we try to tell stories about the overlooked, the untold, and the flat out amazing. And so we do this on a global scale. I think we've told stories in about 85 countries now, which are my favorite types of stories to tell because we aim to surprise you, and the world is a really big place, and so there's a lot going on that you don't even know about, and at the same time, it's unbelievably small because hopefully we all care about the same thing. And so there's this one story that we've done out of China about these two best friends. One of them is blind and the other has no arms. But together, they realized that there was a problem in the environment in the town that they lived in, and so they aimed to plant a forest. So together, a blind man and an armless man have planted 10,000 trees to basically help sustain the environment in their town. And you can imagine that's really, really hard. Basically, the one friend who has no arms will lead his blind friend to get to where they're going. The man with no arms is able to dig the holes with his feet. And you watch this and you realize that the earth is a place that we all need to work together to save. And if these two men who have what some would consider a disability that wouldn't allow them to do that, if they're able to not only plant one tree, but plant 10,000 trees, then what can I do? What can I be doing to make a difference? And so it's the stories like that of people doing absolutely incredible things that you didn't know about that hopefully shine a light on that part of the world, make you realize that we all hopefully are fighting for the same things, and inspire you, to your point, to take action and to do something.
Okay, I'll jump into that because I think that our comments are somewhat related. So for What Concerns Global Young Voices, my favorite, there are many stories because we focus our stories on youth that have a big impact. So of course it's very difficult because there are topics that are really important, so it's difficult to select. But I think one thing that I am especially proud of and that I really like is we ran a project within a CSR program of a large corporation, and basically we selected some people from all around the world to write stories about sustainability, so it's strictly related to the UN SDGs. And basically we had amazing stories. For example, there are two girls in India who are just 17, and they found a way to bring water from the city to the slums, and now a small area of the slums is able to receive fresh water, which is something. They're just 17. Then there is other stories, like for example, another girl from Oman. She spoke about this company who is creating new plastic cups that once you're done drinking your coffee, you basically can plant a seed in them. So all these amazing stories. Some are more emotional than others. Some are more practical, but still they're all really interesting. And reading them, you can really understand where they're trying to go, and you can be inspired by them to do something similar in your own country. But I think that the most important thing is that hidden stories are all around us. You really need to talk to people close to you. Yesterday I was talking to Evan. Evan, are you here? There he is. So I was just talking to Evan before I ran an interview with him, and what are you doing, and so on. And he spoke to me about his project. So basically what he does is he connects blind people with nature. I had never thought about the difficulties that blind people encounter when interacting with nature. And nature is such a beautiful thing, and they're missing out on all these experiences. So what he does, he among many other things in his NGO, he created and built braille trails in forests so that blind people can, through their symbols and reading them in their own way, understand and interact with nature that way. So I think, and this is amazing, and I just found him by chance. So talk to each other, because the hidden stories are all within you, and there's 300 hidden stories here. So
when I think about hidden stories or untold stories, I think about the stories within the stories that we have performed along the way when we're out producing our field projects. So one of the most recent field projects that we did was we went down to Orlando, where the mass shooting happened at Post Nightclub. And we were able to reach out to people, whether it be a survivor, a family member, someone who was killed, and also first responders, and have them just come in and tell us their story in their words. It was hard at first because they didn't really trust us, because the media had been in and out, for the past X amount of months, come in and telling the story in the way that the news sometimes does, or for the most part does, and they had to kind of feel us out first. They were tired of being exploited. So after we would talk to this person, then they would call that person who may have canceled on us and say, hey, you know what, it's really good, you should come and just talk to them, because we were giving them a platform to tell their story in their way, and in turn, we're telling their stories in their words. So there was an officer from a neighboring city who was called out to the scene. His name is Omar, and he told us about being inside of the club and hearing all these people's phones ringing, but they couldn't answer it because they were deceased. And so his message that he wrote for his portrait was, I wish they could have answered their phones. And as he's telling his story, you can literally catch chills, because he was talking about the one phone ring that he heard, and it was coming closer and closer and closer. And then he looked on the ground and realized it was because it was floating past in blood. And it was heartbreaking for him, heartbreaking to even hear it. And he had a very hard time with deciding whether or not he would go back to the scene of where it happened at, because he hadn't been. So we connected him with Celeste, who was a survivor of the Boston Marathon bombing. She lost her legs. And we had them on FaceTime, and they were talking to each other. Celeste was like, hey, I went back for the first time a year later. You can do this, be strong, I'm here for you. And that's a story within a story, and they're connected now. They speak on their own, even outside of us. So it's so many levels and layers to the things that happen to us, and then what happens after these things happen, and then when we meet someone else that it happened to. It's just a continual story, and you just think the world, we're just creating this big book, and that's probably what I love most about what I do, is just that connecting people.
Amy, would you like to add anything else?
I totally agree with Fresh. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that you kind of stumble across. You don't quite know where they are. For me, often, though, at the same time, the most important stories I think I reported on are ones that I took a really, really long time for me to report, which can be difficult, just given the fact that you don't have always a lot of time or resources to do so. At the UN, I think with my reporting, one of my favorite stories, or I guess series I've done, has been looking at kind of the internal politics of the UN. So before the Secretary General was selected last year, there was a big push among some groups for a woman to lead the UN. And there were, different groups that were really pushing for this. And when it became clear that didn't happen, we have Secretary General Guterres now, who's, I think a lot of people think are doing an amazing job, he's doing really good work. These people kind of reconvened, and they said, all right, let's figure out now how to get gender parity at top levels of the UN, something we really haven't had ever, basically. So they got together, and these women who are really at the top of their fields, and academics and think tanks, and they started coming up together with a list of women who are just doing amazing work across the field to present it to the Secretary General. So that's the kind of story that when I learned of the work that they were doing, and they were pretty successful, I think, at really going to him and moving this forward, I thought this is something that, to me, I thought was really fascinating. That's, this is kind of how you could have top levels of diplomacy, top level people, including the UN, really being formed just by people saying, okay, our first plan didn't work out, so let's come back together and think about how we could move forward on this.
So I think what we can say at this point is that it's not only the big headlines that are important and the big stories, but also the untold small stories that we see every day. So why don't we move on to the impact of such stories, and maybe how do you think the stories that you have worked on, or stories that you have seen or you have listened to, they can persuade and impact both the public opinion and the policymakers?
It's interesting because I think that some of the stories I thought would have the biggest impact didn't, and some of the other ones that I did. So I did a story years ago, 2011, on a practice in Nepal called chapati, where women, when they have their periods in a very rural part of Nepal, are often not allowed into the house. They're made to stay or sleep in sheds because it's considered sort of impure for them to be inside. So this kind of picked up after I reported on this, and then I think very recently, this past week or so, Nepal has criminalized it now for people who make women do this, so they could get penalized for this. So sometimes I've seen impacts like that. That would probably be one of the clearer ones. Some work I've done in Exxon has resulted in a criminal investigation into Exxon right now. More often than not, though, I think that you put a story out there, you tell a story, and it just kind of lives. And you just live with that, and you don't quite know. It just sort of ricochets, and you could wait for years potentially for something like that to have an impact. But I do think that knowing that it can impact the life of one person or a few people, that still means something.
I think what's so fascinating, and Amy mentioned it too, the way things just live on. This morning we had a young lady who I met at St. John's University that came up. She was actually one of the storytellers that we had on campus. She shared her story. She took her portrait and she spoke about how their world changed her life. And for me, that's very important to hear, because that means not only did you have a great experience, but you took something from our time together, and you carried it with you moving forward. Like I told the people in the session yesterday, like if you open your mind to what it is that we're doing, if you understand that we're not trying to change your views on anything, we're giving you a platform to share something, but at the same time, you're hearing it yourself. You're hearing yourself say these things. And sometimes it may be someone opening up for the first time. We can get 1 million shares on social media. We can get, BuzzFeed or whoever else doing our story, but the impact that it has on you as an individual and how you proceed after you read one of our stories, after you see one of our videos, that's what's most important. We want you to leave being a better human. We want you to leave feeling good about yourself, or at least relieved that you may have touched on something that you've been holding in for a long time. And like I said yesterday, if all else fails, you got a cute Instagram picture. So that's that.
What about this side of our panel?
So our goal at Great Big Story is to tell stories that make the world feel like a smaller place. I think that there's a big responsibility in that right now. Berna had kind of touched on this. We're in a very odd place right now where the world can seem really dark and really scary and really negative. And hopefully what we do by telling the types of stories that we do and evoking the type of emotion that we try to evoke, which errs on the side of like optimistically evocative. We aim to inspire you, we aim to make you laugh, we aim to show you something that's really, really freaking cool. And hopefully in doing that, we're not trying to whitewash the world, we're not trying to ignore the fact that there are issues and problems, but hopefully we remind you that the world is not a scary place. That there are absolutely incredible people across the globe in our own backyard who are doing amazing things, who have great missions that they're trying to accomplish, and that hopefully helps people take a step back and remind them that it's all going to be okay, that everything is going to be okay, and the world is not as scary as sometimes it might seem when you're scrolling through your Facebook feed. And that as we talk about big impact, small impact, I mean, that to me is almost the biggest impact, because it is extremely personal, as Fresh was talking about.
One of my favorite stories to tell when I think about impact is a project that Instagram worked on last year around Pride in the US, which happens in June. So focusing on LGBTQ pride and visibility. We worked together with this awesome LGBTQ advocate named Raymond. I think he was 23 at the time. And he had created an Instagram account called Visible Me. And he used Visible Me specifically, actually really similar to the way that Taylor used it with Naked Diaries, in that he was like, there are some blogs out there, there's, sort of like parts of major news outlets that focus on LGBTQ issues, but there's nowhere where I can see actual faces and stories and videos of young people who are dealing with any kind of issues that they're dealing with in the queer community. There's no one that I can see and really like connect with. And so he used Visible Me on Instagram as a platform to collect the stories of young people dealing with any kind of issues in the queer community, whether that be coming out, talking to their family, talking to their friends, or especially feeling safe or included in sometimes like small rural communities in the middle of America where they don't feel like they can be their true selves. And so we connected with Raymond to sort of promote Visible Me during the month of June last year. And we asked him, we're going to give you a spot on the Explore page. Does anybody here use Instagram? Yay! Oh, good. There used to be a spot on the Explore page where we would feature videos. And so we were like, you know what, if you're going to be putting together, they're sort of already collecting video sort of testimonials, it was 15-second videos at the time, of young people talking about their journey being in the queer community. Let's give you a spot on the Explore page for everyone to see it for a week. And so I was like, let's talk to your advocates, talk to the young people that you've spoken to in your advocation throughout the US, and see who'd like to be profiled, or who'd like to have their video submitted and spotlit, or who would want to submit a video. And we're like, let's keep it on the down low, because we can only feature like 50 videos at a time. And he ended up getting over 400 entries. A lot of them from young people who didn't want to be outed necessarily. They didn't want to have their name out there or their location, but they wanted other people to know in other small towns and other rural communities and other not as inclusive communities in the US that, I hear you, I'm out there, I'm feeling what you're feeling. And so we were able to feature that on the Explore page for a week. The impact there was that Visible Me got like 200% more submissions of videos and photos of people being like, I want to tell my story as well. I didn't know that we even had a platform to do this. And we were able to land stories with BuzzFeed and Teen Vogue and 17, and Visible Me basically became way, way more visible. And so the impact there is sort of on the community level, that it was just connecting person to person who didn't know that this safe world existed for them on Instagram. And we were really, really proud of that sort of closer personal impact.
Okay, so I can definitely relate to what the other panelists have said, so I'm just going to maybe mention something that hasn't been thrown out there, but that hopefully you can also relate to. So basically, at Global Young Voices, we give space to young people who are doing things for their communities, who are helping out, who are undertaking noble initiatives. And I think that young people suffer from the phenomenon of ageism. So some people are too young for the media to see them relevant, for the general media to see them relevant. So this is really what we're trying to do, make an impact by giving visibility to these people. So perhaps maybe you also relate to, I guess Instagram does, to this kind of trend. So we're trying to look really at the hidden stories and make them emerge, because as she said, changes really occur all through society, and they're even within the small ecosystems of our families or our networks. You can really create an impact by telling these stories.
I would like now to explore maybe not the storyteller side of our panelists, and maybe you could tell us a story that impacted you and helped you understand the world better. Do you have any stories that marked really that we could share with our audience? Yes. You could have done it, you could have listened to it,
I have a million. I'm trying to think.
I wish we had time for a movie.
I know, right? I have to pick one. Give me like 30 seconds.
No.
Would anyone have a story they would like to share with us that they think helped them understand the world? Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Evan Bernard. I'm from Georgia, in the United States. And when I talk to people about my project with Nature for All and helping the visually impaired with access to nature, I find it is very useful to use stories. And one of the stories that I always like to tell is after I built a Bro Nature Trail, I led a trail walk for visually impaired youth and student volunteers to share nature experience. And at the beginning of the trail, one of the visually impaired youth was kind of frightened. He was a bit hesitant in his new surroundings, but as he walked with his peer partner along the trail and his partner motivated him, his fear really dissolved into excitement as he felt the leaves and hugged the trees. And by the end of the trail, he was asking if he could come back again and walk the trail. And I think that stories like these help people to understand the emotions of the audience that you work with. And it helps you then realize that what you are working on has really impacted you, but it has impacted other people as well. And I know that not just me and the visually impaired youth gained a lot from that. The partner of the person who walked the trail afterward had a completely new perspective of what it was like to first walk in nature. And especially from the point of view, if you could say a view, of someone who typically does not have an opportunity to go out and experience it. So I think it's really important to tell stories and give that perspective.
Yeah, sure. I think this is very interesting actually, because a good story is the one that helps us understand ourselves and see ourselves in others. So I think that really what summarizes what we just read.
I think that's a great point, and I think mostly the stories are best told, or I guess stories of other people are best told when you're able to get as close to their experiences as you possibly can. So for me, I think the most evocative stories I've been able to tell are the ones where I've actually been able to spend a good amount of time with people, right? Sources that I'm working with or whose stories I'm reporting on. So a story comes to mind I did in southern Arizona on interior checkpoints, basically federal government checkpoints that are designed kind of serve as a buffer between the US and Mexico. And they do a few different things. One is to keep a variety of things, people, drugs, out of the United States, even though they're within the United States, but they also sort of keep undocumented immigrants who are living south of these checkpoints from going north inadvertently. So I spent time over the course of a month with a variety of different people who are experiencing these checkpoints in different ways, and all of them are very, very angry and afraid of these checkpoints. But actually just, spending a day with a woman, a documented woman who lives south of these checkpoints, going around with her in her town, spending time with her at her house, seeing just how small and contained her life is. She has to go to a hospital, can't get to that hospital. She wants to see her family in Mexico, she can't go there. You get a different feeling of really, you're able to kind of tell that story with a lot more color, with a lot more truth, I think, than you ever would if you spent 20 minutes talking to that person.
So one of the stories that come to mind that changed my perspective on a good bit of things was from a student that I met at St. John's University. Growing up, where I'm from, you told college, just go to college and everything will be okay, you know. And even when I would come home from school and visit, you know, people around the neighborhood would be like, oh, there you go, college girl. Like, it was a big deal because people from my neighborhood didn't leave, you know. And a lot of times if they left, it was because they were killed through the gun violence or situations like that. So there was a young man that we met, and his message that he brought on his arms was, there's a roof, I promise. So of course that evoked my curiosity. I wanted to know, well, what's the story behind that? And he talked about, like, the program coordinators or the group that brought us down, you know, they had such amazing things to say about him. Oh, he's awesome, he's involved in this group, he's in that club, he does that. And as he tell his story, we realized he was being a part of those groups because they served pizza on Mondays, or this group had tacos on Tuesday, you know, or this group had this meal on Wednesday. His story uncovered the fact that he was homeless. So there's a roof, I promise, came from one night he was hanging out in one of his friend's dorm rooms, and it was real late, so his friend was like, why are you leaving? You might as well just stay. And he was like, where you going? And his answer was, there's a roof, I promise. But come to find out, he was really staying in one of the classrooms of a building. He knew exactly what time the custodian would be in the building cleaning up. He knew that if he snuck in and went this way, the custodian would be that way. And when the custodian would leave, the building would be locked and he would have somewhere to stay. And one night he got caught, security asked him to leave, but they didn't bother to ask him, well, why are you even here? You know, no one kind of checked on him in that way because, again, you go to St. John's University, you're good, you know, you're here, you're covered. And it was so crazy to see the program coordinators, just their reaction to it. Like, they did not know that they had this brilliant young man pretty much sleeping in buildings on their campus. You know, they didn't find out until he told his story while we were there. And so that made me think that, you know, just because someone goes to college or just because someone works here or just because someone does that, that does not necessarily mean that they're okay. You know, there's still things that we battle with, things that we struggle with, and you may never know. And people don't think to check on each other a lot because, oh, she has a good job, she's okay. Oh, he's off at college, he's covered. So that's just the power of a story. You know, you learn so much about people when you learn that these things that you may think only happen to someone who's jobless or someone who may be impoverished, can happen to anybody.
Right, it counters our assumptions, and yes, we have someone from the audience who would like to intervene.
Actually, I would like to share my own story. So my name is Hasina and I'm from Afghanistan. I flee to Norway in 2015. By profession, I'm a journalist. I used to work with Election Commission of Afghanistan in 2014. I was deputy spokesperson. A bomb was planted in my car, and I got injured. 15% of my body burned. My spinal cord 4 ribs was broken. I spent almost 4 months just lying and 3 months trying to walk back. And then when I walked, I came to Norway as a refugee, thinking that everything would be okay, which was not the case. After coming to Norway, a refugee crisis happened, and I stayed in refugee camp for a year. In that year, of course, it's a depressing time, and I could not think of something to just start up back the life I had. So the one thing I had was education and my profession. Like, I was a journalist. I had a degree, so I tried to find out how the education system works and what can I do and stuff. So I got to know, but if you're from a normal country which is not in conflict, you go with the process which will take you 2 years. But if you're from countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Somalia, then you have to prove that you have studied. So you have to give an exam from all subjects that you have studied, and there were kind of developing that at that time, even that was not something established. When I got to know about this, I got really depressed. And lots of my friends Afghans, they told me that I should learn Norwegian and start doing odd jobs. And that's the only option. I tried to convince myself. I couldn't. So I decided to go to universities by myself, asking them if they could just let me go in a class, even not that I could be admitted, just to learn and be in the class and environment of university. I went to lots of universities. None of them had classes in English. Some had, some said it doesn't work in the system. Well, finally, when it came to March last year, I felt like, okay, it's not happening. I got depressed and stuff, but I went to Oslo and I talked to some other universities, and finally, one university, which is called Oslo Akershus University. And the rector was not Norwegian and American, which lives there. He said, okay, we will let you to study with us, but a single subject. So I went to study a single subject in journalism last year level. I studied, and as a result, I got a B grade, and they were kind of impressed, and that's how everyone kind of noticed that a refugee is studying before the whole process of going to recognition and stuff. And then they some people said no, it's not allowed, and some said yes, it is. And after that, they submitted me to study another course in master's level, and I did that as well, with B grades, and they were kind of impressed. And so then media reached, and I went to media in Norway. And as a result of that, today in Norway, they're starting something called complementary courses for asylum seekers. So that was just a story.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It takes courage to do that, so thank you. I want to remind you that we will have a Q&A session at the end of our discussion, and we welcome stories and questions from all of you. Would any of our panelists like to talk about stories that have impacted them?
After this? Yeah, I was like, that's a different one.
Hard to talk then. All right, so we want to talk now about the creative ways that we can use and the creative tools that will allow us to, tell stories in new ways and more impactful ways. So would any of our panelists like to give examples of a creative way they covered the story or told the story?
I don't know that it is incredibly creative, but I think that's something that is really important for us, is everybody has a story. I mean, we've heard two here today, and I think that every single one of you could tell us your story. And I think it's incredibly important for us when we tell stories. That's a really big responsibility that our subjects have given us, and we don't take it lightly at all. And so for us, it is extremely important that we let people tell their own story. I think that there's some times where you'll see a lot of correspondents almost put themselves in the center of the story. And so for us, it's really important to give people a voice, to give people an outlet, to make sure that they're telling their own story as they've seen it, as they've heard it, as they've felt it, as they smelled it, and make sure that we're not kind of over-editorializing it, not putting ourselves in the center of it, and really make sure to give people a platform. And I think that's something that's really important.
I think with my experience with Dear World, something that I like to tell people as a disclaimer is only give me with what you're comfortable sharing. But at the same time, know that I'm going to push you. And the reason why I'm going to push you is because I want you to get as specific as possible. I want you to give me as many details as possible, because if your story is something that I take on the road and I share with other people, I want it to be unique to you. You know, I want to take this story that only you can tell and be able to share it with other people, you know, in hopes that they see themselves in it, or they find a way to connect to someone they don't know, or they use it as a means to understand someone who's very different from them. You know, we have people that aren't comfortable sharing some things because they may be super private. Or, you know, for my coming out stories, a lot of people haven't come out to their family and friends yet. So they want to leave that level of mystery. And it's totally fine. But I want you to always know, like, this is yours. You know, you can look at this picture and it may, you know, say something that nobody else will understand, which is why they're going to ask you questions. But you know, like, it's like a little secret with yourself, you know. So I think that's important too when interacting with Zero World or any project where you're telling a story. It's yours. You're just giving us permission to, you know, to put it out there for you.
I feel like at DevX we're always thinking about ways to make our content more engaging for people, because most of what we do as reporters, we on the other side, it's not a reporting team, but on the reporting side, we're writing content. It's just traditional sort of, I guess, text copy that we have only online. What we're starting to do increasingly is publish short video segments, which are just really fit for Twitter and for Facebook, so they're under 2 minutes long. They'll typically be embedded in our text stories. We're doing things like DevX Live, so reporters are talking live on Facebook Live with people, going to events with that sort of thing, thinking about more creative ways to display our photos, things like that, basically, because I understand that people don't want to read long stories. I don't always want to read long stories. So trying to bring our coverage more up to speed, really, with what people want to do, breaking content down in ways, so when you go to an event or you're thinking about something like the Paris Climate Agreement that's kind of complicated, top things you should be knowing about that. So while still keeping our content, I think, our coverage substantive.
Thank you. What about Instagram? I know that with Instagrams we have pictures that tell stories. So what are the creative ways you have used to tell stories?
Yeah. Absolutely. I can start with pictures, of course. I definitely want to talk about a bunch of other creative tools and try to hone it down. A little more on the lighthearted side when I'm thinking about Instagram as a picture. Last year, of course, every summer we open up applications to apply as Instagram interns. And I think the most creative entry that I saw for an Instagram intern is someone they literally made they turned their resume into an Instagram profile. And every picture and every video sort of illustrated a part of their resume, which I thought was super interesting. And she did end up getting hired on the VR side of our team, which is very cool. But in terms of also creative storytelling, Instagram recently, a year ago, last August, launched something called Instagram Stories, which I know I'm seeing some nods and some acknowledgements, and I'm sure you all have opinions about Instagram Stories, which I definitely want to hear. But I love the creative ways that young people have used Instagram Stories, not just to say, like, here's my foot, here's my lunch, I'm at the mall, but to sort of portray whatever message that they want that's either serious or not serious. I follow this one awesome teen-ran zine called Risen Zine, sorry, and they use Instagram Stories in particular to highlight their stories about social and political issues. So they might use stories to say, like, we just put up this story about, immigration into the US, like DM us your thoughts and we'll repost like the most thoughtful things, or we'll reply, and they'll like repost screenshots of people's DMs showing the community's reaction to their stories. I believe the UN Women account last year on, so they were using Instagram Stories basically for one day to just use emojis and images and markers to create awareness around World AIDS Day and just facts about HIV and AIDS that were up to date at the time. And recently, so Instagram has an Instagram, it's called Instagram, and we use that Instagram platform to do one of my favorite things so far on Instagram Stories. So this past June in San Francisco, there was an event called Brave New Voices. And it was a gathering of over 600 slam poets from all over the world, from 13 to 19. So these are like performative theatrical poets from every state and every country. And we used Instagram Stories basically to record 10 to 15 second clips of poets from different countries, and especially in different languages, because Instagram has about almost 230 million followers, and about 80% of them are outside of the US and don't speak English as their primary language. So we were able to feature these teen slam poets from all over the world, speaking in English, speaking in Arabic, speaking in Spanish, speaking in Japanese, and sort of just like spitting hot fire about whatever they wanted, about social political issues, about their feelings, about music. We're able to sort of give that reach in this very sort of like quick, digestible, expires, but you can still get inspired from it sort of way. So, but I do want to hear all of your guys' opinions on Instagram stories because you might have some, so come catch me after this.
Would you like to add anything else about creative ways that you have used to tell stories? Okay. We can maybe now sum it up with talking about the role of storytellers with making change. What do you think is the main role of storytellers, and how can they make change happen?
My answer to things regarding making change or advancing anything is just to be a great human. You know, imagine how much better the world would be if everybody was just good people. So whatever it is that you can hold yourself accountable for, hold yourself to a high standard of that and be great at it. And I do feel as if one day it'll all come back full circle and we'll be all right.
Any final thoughts from before we start our Q&A session? The main role of storytellers in our world today.
I mean, I've had sort of touched on it a little bit, but ask really good questions and get out of the way. You guys, everybody has a good story, and so sometimes some people need a little bit of help telling it, and so that's where being curious is really helpful. But then get out of the way. Let people tell your truth, and let people hear what you've got to say.
I totally agree with that, and I think it's important to keep in mind that as big of a deal it is for you when you're telling that story, it's a bigger deal for the person whose story is being told. So it's really important always to just think very carefully about, you know, being clear what you're going to report on or tell, and being honest about that, and being very sensitive about how you do that.
Okay, thank you for that. We will start our Q&A session now. If you have any stories to tell, you're welcome to reach out later to our panelists. And if you have questions, you're also welcome to ask them now. Also, I want to remind you that you are heard when the red light is turned on your mic. Okay, we could start here.
Hi, my name is Olivia. I'm from the UK. The panel touched a little bit about bubbles and making change. And I wondered if they could just say a little bit more about how stories can be used as a force of persuasion for people who most need to hear them, especially when you're thinking about breaking down barriers and trying to build consensus around real issues that we're facing. For example, combating prejudice and inequality. Thanks.
Yeah, so for Walking Towards Global Young Voices, I mentioned the sustainability project that we did, that is still running because we're in the second round with the same corporation. But last year, we ran a gender equality event at Fairleigh Dickinson University. And I think that the only way you can really break down barriers is to raise awareness with everybody. Within your ecosystem, within your network, you need to raise awareness, and then the other person will have their own network, and then the other person will have their own network. So it's a chain. You really need to raise awareness on these issues, and you can do so by running campaigns. I know a lot of you are actually doing that because I've spoken to some of you. You can do events, and you exploit social media. Social media is really it allows you to reach so many people around the world. Now it even translates the post. So really try to build information and try to get traction on your information. So this is my advice.
Any other questions from the audience? Please.
Hi, I'm Pranit Gupta from India. I've been working on a project which kind of connects the underprivileged communities to the government, because all of us are very privileged. We are sitting at the UN discussing the SDGs. But the people who lie at the core of those 17 SDGs, the underprivileged communities, they do not get to put their opinions at the front lines of change. So I started a project which connected underprivileged communities to the government. But I am looking for more effective and innovative ways so that the government can actually hear what those people have in store. because to a person in a rural area, it does not matter what the US does with the North Korea, but it more matters like about the water supply, the food security there. So I'm looking for solutions on how the government and intergovernmental agencies can sort of help me or help those communities connect and put forth their opinions and bring change at the minimalistic level. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add anything? Any more questions from the audience? Please.
So more than a question, this is a story, and this has two parts. You know, it starts in my university. I did my bachelor's degree in the University of Nevada, Reno. And during my college career, I had the opportunity to become the president of international students. And one of the biggest issues that I had when I was at that position is that international students, we speak English with a foreign accent. And most of the local people tend to think that we were not smart because of not speaking English with the local accent. And that reflected in the university authorities when they started treating us as children and not as mature students or adults. And I fought hard during the year that I was the president to change that picture, to change the narrative. And I had to force myself into meetings with the authorities until they understood that we were the students, also being part of the student body. We were working in the labs, we were taking positions of power within the university, and just because we had an accent didn't mean that we were less smart or less qualified than the local students. And I was always resilient to tell the story in different forums because it definitely looks bad on my institution. You know, we do not expect an academic environment to having these stereotypes towards people from different countries. But when I shared it yesterday, I realized that this is not a problem that only happened in my campus. This was happening in campus across the nation with different international students that are sitting here today and that felt the same way in their communities. So, and this is something that all of you inspired me to say when you said that sharing your stories make people aware of their problems, because after what I shared, a bunch of my fellow delegates came to me telling me that they felt the same way and that they wanted to start an organization to tackle these problems. And I just wanted to thank all of you to be our inspiration today, to start sharing these stories and to don't be afraid of doing it. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Now we'll take more questions, but now as we near the end of our session, I would like to remind you that there will be at 1 p.m. there will be a Microsoft exhibition in conference room F between 1 and 3 p.m. So I think there was a question in the back. If you have a question, you're welcome. In the blue jacket, black jacket.
Does it work? Yes. Okay. Hi, my name is Akib. I'm from Pakistan. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So I have a question for Fresh and for Bernadette specifically. So from the past 5-6 years, I've been doing community services, and I have almost 6 years, 60 projects. But in the last 1 year, I started my own platform where I produce not funny, but I would say short videos using light humor to address stereotypes and how to end them. For example, how is it like being a dark woman in a society such as Pakistan? That was one of the titles of the videos. So my question is that how should what are the core elements for the content to be more approachable by the people, to make them seem more humane or like human, to have them so that people can make a connection with it more easily? Because people, I want to know the core points for a good story for a video or content in general. Thank you.
Sure, I love that question. One of the things I do at my job is I reach out to creators, influencers, emerging stars, and they ask the same exact question as you. Just I think what I'm saying is important. How do I get more eyeballs on my videos? Well, on Instagram specifically, it's like a 60-second video limit, right? But I think we all know that young people have a very, very, very small attention span. I think old people have a small attention span. The whole world has a small attention span, right? So I always say to sort of keep the gist or the hook of it, most of them the first like 3 to 4 seconds is what I usually tell creators. Make sure that there's something that hooks them either visually or sort of like emotionally, and that almost always means person looking at the camera. It's really about the human connection, weirdly, when it comes to like getting visibility and getting likes and comments and things. We found that there's just so much higher engagement when you establish very quickly that a human is talking to you, and this is not just something that, or a human is talking to the camera, and there's interaction going on between the viewer and the creator, and it's not just you sort of passively watching something. So that's something I would offer. And just speaking for a platform like Instagram, creators really grow in terms of viewership and engagement and reach when they interact with other creators that are similar to them and collaborate. So if you're sharing, sort of like they call it audience sharing, you're sharing audiences, you're showing that you are open to collaboration with people with similar messages and voices, and you sort of join up and create things together. But I'm happy to speak more about it later.
We'll take one more question due to time limit. But we have a question in the back, the white shirt.
Hi, I can't afford not to speak here. Like yesterday, I attended Ms. Johnson's session. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't have the opportunity to speak. I cannot underestimate the power of story sharing. I did not know the power of my story until the day I narrated it. I am Aisha Tujeng. I'm from West Africa, the Gambia. I am a feminist. I call myself the elegant feminist with no contradiction. You can be a feminist at the same time elegant. I work at grassroots level. I work with the local people. I've been in the work of women's human rights for almost 7 years, and I am a survivor. My clitoris was cut when I was 6 months. I was almost forced into child marriage because I got pregnant at 15. And when I started work, but fortunately for me, I was able to go back to school and get a degree in political science and psychology. Then I went to a community sensitization. I was sensitizing parents on the importance of girls' education, and they started giving me complaints that girls get pregnant at a very young age. And as a result, they can't continue their education. And then I said to myself, I have a similar story to all of those girls. Why not I narrate my story? And when I narrated my story, I saw the impact. The parents, all those parents inside that room have pledged to enroll their daughters back to school. And that is a very, very huge turning point for me. Since then, I have decided I will narrate my story. And I've narrated my story worldwide, and I have seen the impact and the power of my story as a survivor, as a woman who grew up in a patriarchal society, a male-dominant society like the Gambia, where girls are told that you cannot succeed because you have caused a very big shame to your family, you get pregnant out of wedlock, and as a result, the future doesn't hold anything bright for you. So I have demystified all those misconceptions, and here I am roaming the world. And then my story served as a powerful instrument to who I am today. It is because of my story that I am where I am today. So I believe in the power of story sharing, and I'm always willing to share my story.
Thank you so much.
I look forward to meeting all of you after your session.
Thanks. If you have any more stories you'd like to share, please contact our panelists. We'll take one last question at the end from the guy in the white shirt because we promised you.
Thank you. Hi guys, it's Assad here from London. Thank you firstly to all the storytellers here. It's been very inspiring hearing from all of you. I too am a storyteller. I created a page on Instagram called Humans in Finance, which is similar to Humans in New York, where we basically share pictures and stories of those working in finance, doing impact work. And the reason behind this is I feel like in the media doesn't necessarily portray the right image of finance. Often they portray, the 0.001% of people who have left the image of finance in a very negative way. So our page essentially, shows all the hardworking, good people who are creating impact and using the power of the industry to leave a positive social impact. So that's basically the reason why we created the page. And my question is, how do we increase traction with millennial generation, and how do we measure impact of the work we're doing? Thank you.
Sure, definitely. Going to follow Humans in Finance directly after this.
Please do, everyone, please do.
Of course. I would say increasing impact amongst the millennial generation, similar to what another gentleman asked, is really about getting the eyeballs that are already looking at something similar to you to look at yours. So it's about, sometimes hashtags work, sometimes, and sort of commenting and connecting with other creators work sometimes too. But I would say the biggest thing is to collaborate. Is there anyone else within your Instagram world or other creators around you that are doing anything even vaguely similar? I think audience share is super, super important, as I mentioned before. Connecting with, when you say humans in finance, I think of humans of New York, I think of humans at the subway, I think of humans, the humans world is so big. Is there a cross collaboration that you can create or that you can start? I don't know about one, but is there a cross collaboration between creators that you can start where you start to share the eyeballs of each other? Because at the core of what you're doing is you're trying to humanize a thing that isn't necessarily humanized, which I think is an effort that people are making in lots of different worlds, and I would say reach out to those people as well and see what you guys can share with each other.
So this is the end of our session. If you have, like I said, if you have any more questions or stories you'd like to share, you're welcome to contact and reach out to our panelists. And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a nice day.